It's a question that takes me back a very long time, well, 10 years, obviously, or just over since we created the foundation. I mean, it was essentially a combination of things. It was obviously the predominant issue is that South Africa, like many other countries, but we have our unique challenges with financial literacy, and the financial services industry is an industry that is quite interesting. And I once said something at a conference which I was teased about for many years thereafter. But I said the financial services industry is an industry that comprised of a group of very intelligent people that create very intelligent products for consumers that don't know anything about them. And I actually used the word stupid consumers in the presentation, for which I was mocked for a couple of years. But I mean, obviously I exaggerated for effect there. The reality is that's what we faced. Most people in South Africa don't know, regardless of what LSM or what background you come from, don't really know certainly about financial products. But the issue goes much deeper than that, even around the basics of budgeting, the basics of managing their own money, et cetera, through the various life stages in life. So it really was a needs-based thing more than anything else. That was the first thing, and it was an opportunity for what I thought the best placed industry body in the country to get involved in that particular space in a more detailed way, and they were already doing certain things, but in a less formal way. That's the first thing. I think the second thing was the fact that the Financial Sector Charter, or Code as it's called, was gazetted, and it provided a platform to enable us to actually raise money to do this properly and independently. So that gave the practical side to it as well, is that companies have to spend a certain amount of money on this, and in the context of the legislation, if they want to achieve the points against the scorecard. So that gave us the ability potentially to raise the money. And the third practical thing that accompanied it as well was the fact that many of the smaller companies don't really have the capacity to do it themselves. So we thought that we could create a vehicle that could enable some of the smaller members of ASISA to do the right thing by creating the economies of scale in the vehicle. Incidentally, a lot of the larger members of ASISA over time have supported it, but the original vision, I think, was really around helping the smaller financial services providers to play a role in consumer education. That was really the initial vision. It's just interesting how it's turned out since then. I think it's been exceeded. I haven't been particularly heavily involved in the foundation for a number of years now. I attend the odd meetings of the foundation, etc. But to see what this vehicle has achieved, and what the people and the pride that the people that run it are, and the dedication with which the people that run it are doing their work, is just amazing. So, as I say, we originally envisaged this being a relatively small vehicle that was run on behalf of some of ASISA's smaller members, and so on and so forth. And to see it reach the kind of economies of scales that it now has, but more importantly, to see the impact that it's having in people's lives. And one of the things that I still am privy to from time to time is these impact reports, or these monitoring and evaluation reports that the foundation does of the impact that it has out there in communities. It's just astounding. I mean, it's just really, really good work. It's really, really good money spent, and they're doing it at scale, which is way beyond what I've envisaged, and those of us that conjured up this idea. So there's absolutely no doubt that it's achieved more than we thought it would achieve, and it's testament to the people that are involved. It's testament to the CEO and her team. They're dedicated to the work. They're passionate about the work. They're committed to the work, and they also do it with an independent mindset and an independent voice. Yes, they're associated to a very powerful industry body, and but they do it independently, and with the beneficiary of the work top of mind all the time as they're doing the work. So basically, the legislation has a target. I think the target is you're supposed to spend 0.3% of your profits every year on consumer financial education. It's 0.3% sounds like a very lot of money, but some of the biggest ASISA members make profits of around 10 billion rand a year, and 0.3% is 30 odd million or something like that. Of that. So there is quite a lot of money going into it. And what the CISA Foundation does is all of its work is compliant. So it is one of the things that the legislation requires is that the outcomes or the impact of the work is independently monitored and evaluated. The foundation does that better than most of the entities in the industry that I've seen doing consumer education. That's and it's an iterative process. It learns from the monitoring and evaluation. So it doesn't just do that to be compliant with the legislation. It actually learns and improves as it goes along through this monitoring and evaluation process, which I think is quite unique in and of itself. In other words, companies that really don't have the resources dedicated to this thing can write out a check and they can be rest assured that they will get their points for it, but more importantly that money will be put to good use. So a lot of the big companies decide, in our experience, or certainly when I was involved, to do a little bit of their own thing, but also support the CISA Foundation in terms of the good work that it's doing. A lot of the smaller companies tend to not have the capacity to do stuff themselves, and therefore get most of their 0.3% of profits to ASISA. Some industry bodies, I think, have tried to compel their members to do this over time. ASISA, we took the deliberate decision that says no, we're not going to try and get the board to compel the membership to do it, simply because the foundation needs to prove its own worth. It needs to prove it's good at providing consumer financial education, which it really has proved over time. It's done excellent work, not just with lower LSM consumers, but it's done excellent work with educating young people to run small businesses. It's done excellent work in the so-called trustee education space, etc. All of the foundation's programs we found over the years have produced very, very good results. It's fundamental. People don't really understand how important financial literacy is. Sometimes we think about a lack of financial literacy as something that so-called lower income or lower LSM consumers suffer from. But I'm often amazed when I'm sitting in my dentist chair at the lack of financial literacy of my dentist, who's an educated, obviously postgraduate individual, etc., or even some of my families who've got master's degrees and stuff like that. And the levels of financial literacy in this country, I think, are by and large relatively low. And as a result, we make poor decisions as people, and as a result, we sometimes prone to being caught in scams. We're prone to be, just making poor decisions that mean that we can't retire, not just that we can't retire properly, but that we can't, provide for our children's education where necessary, or whatever life's milestones that you think that we have. And particularly in a shrinking economy, or in an economy that's struggling, you need to do the best with what you've got. So even it's a kind of a counter-cyclical thing, it becomes more important the less that you've got. And what I like about the foundation's approach is one of the reasons is it's quite pragmatic. So one of the reasons why it started with this small business, its Flame project, I remember years ago, is because it found it pointless educating consumers that had no income. What is the point of making somebody financially illiterate if they don't have an income? So it rather went down to the source and said, let's assist with financial literacy aspects of running a small business, so that you can actually create that source of income to make the financial literacy that much more valuable. And it's that kind of pragmatic decision making over time that's very important. But the other big systemic issue is, in South Africa, the biggest pot of South African savings, and I mean, I don't have the latest savings statistics in South Africa with me, but in my days at ASISA, that was around the 8 trillion rand mark, and 8 trillion rand, so that's 8,000 billion or 8 million million. It's a lot of zeros. Okay, so it's a fairly large savings pool, but more than half of that money sits in the retirement fund industry, and what is very interesting about the retirement fund industry is that it's governed by boards of trustees. So each fund has a board of trustees, and very often the boards of trustees or the directors of these schemes are employee representatives. And even the employer-nominated representatives very often don't really have the technical acumen and understanding of managing these big pools of money. And I think that's one area where the foundation has made quite a significant impact, is to enable those fiduciaries of these schemes to actually to govern the assets within those schemes a lot better, to the benefit of the millions of people, ordinary South African citizens, that are members of those schemes. So the foundation has approached this thing holistically. It hasn't just looked at the lower LSM consumer, at the so-called bottom of the pyramid, but it's also looked at the people looking after their money, and looked at enabling those people to do their jobs better. And even those people have given the foundation very good feedback on its work over time. So systemically, financial literacy, I think, is more important than people actually think it is. It's a difficult question where to from here, because a lot of what the foundation does is driven by the financial sector code or financial dispensation. But the reality is, if you look at the country as a whole, I do believe that financial education is something that should be aimed at all LSMs. In other words, not just low-income consumers. I think that there's a need for financial education across the board. It might be a different type depending of financial education that's needed. And I think that expansion of the foundation's mandate somehow, I think, is potentially crucial. The other thing is, I think it's about time that the financial sector started, and I don't know quite how it does this, but started to partner more effectively with other industries or whatever, because financial literacy is in the collective interest. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, is financial literacy of an employee is in an employer's context, and that employer can be operating in any sector. And to me, what the financial services industry, and ASISA in particular, should start looking at is to start looking to see if it can raise capital from outside of the ASISA membership in order to expand the scope of what it's doing. It has a fabulous track record now of doing a good job with the money it's been entrusted with so far. But to expand that, because financial literacy and the programs that it's run are compliant to another part of the BEE legislation called socioeconomic development that's applicable to everybody, not just the financial services industry. And for me, that's where I think ASISA should be looking beyond just the financial services industry for funding. It should look past that, because this is something that's in the collective interest and not just the interest of financial services providers.